They're on. Can you hear me? How many of you are scared of sharks? Scared of sharks? Okay, we don't have too many sharks in Wisconsin, so maybe not a number one fear. Spiders? Okay, a little bit more realistic fear in Wisconsin, right? Encourage you to turn to your message outline there in your worship folder. I'm going to have you write down something today. I'm going to have you write down something later, so encourage you to have that out. Maybe some of you, how about those freaky clowns? Anybody afraid of those freaky clowns? Yeah, there was a freaky one walking around Green Bay a year ago or so. I'm not scared of snakes. Any snake people here? You're scared of them, or you like snakes, Adam? Don't like snakes. I killed a rattlesnake the first week in San Antonio. First week I lived down there. No big deal. No problem. Kids, how about storms? You afraid of storms? Anyone in here? Okay. Little guy in the back. Excellent. All right. How many of you are afraid of mice? We have lots of mice in Wisconsin. All right, mice. We had some good friends when we lived in St. Paul, lived 3 doors down, and Shelly calls me one day, "Shah, you need to get here now. Aaron's not going to be home for a few hours. There's a mouse in my kitchen. Come, right now." So I run down, 3 doors down, open the door. Shelly's standing on the counter in the kitchen, pointing at the behind the stove. "There's a mouse. It's back there." I look behind the stove. I look behind the dishwasher. I look behind the refrigerator. I looked all over the living room. I looked everywhere. Tell you, I have no idea where this mouse is. I don't know, maybe in your bed. I don't know where it went. I don't know. I don't know what happened to it. Sometimes we are afraid. Sometimes it's bigger things like losing our job or losing our marriage or losing a friendship. Those of you who love hunters but aren't a hunter, you maybe are afraid your loved one is going to get shot out there, deer hunting, right? Some of you, maybe that's your fear. Maybe it's losing your health or being alone by yourself when you're older. This passage we heard earlier from Paul. Paul shared he was where when he wrote this? In prison. Okay? In prison, Paul says, this is the New King James Version. We heard the NIV earlier, which says, "Don't be timid." But this one says, and the ESV and the Old King James, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear." Not given us a spirit of fear. And Paul is in prison, chained to a wall, probably being beaten, probably like in a dungeon kind of prison. Instead, he says, "But the Lord has given us a spirit of power, of love, and of sound mind." See, fear does not come from God. And we should not embrace something that does not come from God. A lot of people say the opposite of faith is fear. But I think actually fear is having the faith in the wrong thing. When we have in our life. We could also say it this way. Fear is placing faith in the what ifs. Fear is placing faith in the what ifs. Maybe that's you. What if my kids get in a car accident? What if they get hurt at school? What if they, what if I lose one of them? What if we lose everything we have? What if my husband loses his job? What if I get sick someday? What if I get hit by a drunk driver? What if? How many of you are paralyzed or sometimes have the what if syndrome? Okay, maybe not paralyzed, but we all have that what if syndrome at times. And it can grip us. Moses had the what if syndrome. Moses was asked to go back to Egypt and free God's people from slavery. If you remember, Moses was pretty well respected by the Pharaoh and well liked, but then one day he saw his people being beaten, and one of the Israelites, got killed by an Egyptian. Moses wasn't too happy about that. So he went and killed that Egyptian that killed the Israelite. Moses found out the next day that one of the Egyptians saw him kill an Egyptian. Moses was a little afraid when he found that out. So he fled. He ran. Some of us do that. We run when we are afraid. We avoid. We just completely dash the other direction. That's what Moses did. He went the other direction. He fled because he was afraid for his life. And what did God do? Showed up in a burning bush on Mount Horeb and said, Moses, I want you to go back to Egypt. I want you to face Pharaoh. I want you to free my people from slavery. And Moses said, yeah, no problem. I got this. I'll take care of this. I'll do whatever you want, God. No, that's not what he said. Verse 1 of chapter 4 of Exodus, Moses answered, what if? Say that with me. What if? What if they do not believe me? Or listen to me? Or they say the Lord did not appear to me? 3 reasons Moses has of why not to go back to Egypt. What if? What if? What if? What if this happens? What if that happens? What if this happens? You might as well stay home in a, locked cage so you're safe. What if? Moses put more faith in his what if than he put in his God. You struggle with that what if syndrome. What if somebody doesn't like me? What if I fail? I'm not sure I can do this. What if I lose my job? What if I lose my marriage or my loved ones? What if I married the wrong person? Don't elbow anybody, please. What if? But actually, what ifs can be okay sometimes because they can actually show us what we value. Why do your what ifs matter? First, your what ifs matter because what you fear the most reveals what you value the most. If you're afraid of losing your marriage, it means you value your marriage. You want an excellent marriage. It's important to you to stay connected to your spouse and have a loving relationship. If you are afraid that your kids are going to get injured or bullied or whatever at school, it means you care about your kids. That's good. You care about what happens to them. You care about how they're treated. They're important to you. You value them. If you care about your finances, it means you value financial security. That's okay, right? As long as it doesn't become more important than our fear of God. We heard the time of Advent. We're going to hear the story of Mary soon. The angel coming to Mary and saying, you're going to have a baby, and they're going to call him Emmanuel, God with us, and you're going to be a virgin when you have this baby. Now, Mary, was a little surprised when she was told this was the plan, but she valued her relationship with God more than she valued what was going to happen to her. During that time, Mary could have been stoned for being pregnant and not being married. But she honored God. She valued God more than anything else. So she received that message. What you fear the most reveals what you value the most. But also at times what you fear the most reveals where you trust God the least. See, sometimes our fears dominate more than our trust of God. Sometimes our fears rule our hearts, rule our minds, dictate how we behave, dictate how we play out our day, how we play out our life. And that's when they become more important than God. We need to acknowledge where our fear is and realize if it's stronger than our faith in God. We need to acknowledge our fear. So, I want you to write it down. I'm trusting God with your number one fear. What is your number one fear? The number one thing you are afraid of, the thing that plagues you, the thing that maybe you work so hard at trying to prevent from happening. Write it down in your outline. I'm trusting God with. What is it? What is it? Your future, your kids, your marriage, your money, your love, your finances, your success, your value. What is it? Now I want you to share it with somebody sitting next to you. And don't tell them your number one fear is to share your fear with the person sitting next to you. That's not the goal. You can make up a fear if you don't want to tell them your real fear. But spend a minute or two chatting with somebody next to you. Share what you wrote down. My number one fear is I'm trusting God with. I used to be afraid of drowning. Not because I couldn't swim, but because I was a lifeguard. And I know how to swim, and I'm very good at swimming. But I was afraid in those lakes when you go deep down. I was determined my leg was going to get caught in weeds, and I was going to get stuck down there. And I was saying, I can save people, but I can't save myself. So I never swam deep in lakes to avoid from that happening. But how do we overcome our deepest fears? The things that plague us, the things that haunt us. How do we overcome them? First, we need to acknowledge your fear and choose to trust God anyway. Acknowledge your fear and trust God anyway. That's what Moses did. He knew what his fear was. His fear was facing Pharaoh. But he said, okay, God, this is what you want me to do. I'm going to go do it. He was afraid the Israelites were going to question him. Are we really supposed to leave? Was it really God who was talking to you? He faced his fear, and he went forward anyway. That's our goal. That's what we need to do with our fears. Trust God more than we trust our fears. That's what happened to David in the Old Testament. David had a massive fear. His fear was not of Goliath, right? We knew that. His fear later on in life was of Saul, King Saul. King Saul saw that David was rising in the ranks. David was wise. David had special gifts. And so King Saul wasn't too fond of this David guy. And so King Saul pursued David. He haunted David. He went after David day in and day out, and his goal was to kill David. And yet, in the midst of that, this is what King David wrote, or he wasn't king yet at that point. He wrote, "In God whose word I praise, in God I trust, and I am not afraid." This psalm is just full of his trust of God. As King Saul was pursuing him, he said, I'm going to trust God. I'm going to lean on God. I'm going to look to God no matter what. And then he says, what can mere mortals do to me? Well, David, actually they can kill you, right? King Saul could kill you. He could get you, he could catch up to you, and he could kill you. But David had an eternal perspective. He said, no matter what happens, even if King Saul catches me and kills me, he cannot conquer me. Because I have life eternal. I trust in God, no matter what happens. He had the attitude of, my God is on the throne, and his will shall be done. done. No matter what, his will shall be done. That's a great mantra to have in our head, isn't it? God's will is going to be done. God's in control. God's in control. He's on the throne. His will be done. That's exactly what Jesus said in the Garden of Gethsemane. A few days before he knew he was going to get murdered on a cross. He knew he was going to be tortured by nails in his wrists and in his feet. He knew what was coming, and yet he said, God, your will be done. He first said, hey, take this cup from me if it's possible. If I can avoid this whole getting crucified thing, that would be great. But your will be done. Your will be done, Lord. That's what he wants. That's what you and I hopefully want. And if you ever have a fear of failure, being a cruddy dad or mom, or failing a school test, or maybe failing in a relationship, it's something that plagues me, and it's bizarre, it's weird. But we all fail at times. We don't make the home run, or we don't get the job promotion, or we don't whatever. Friday, it was proof to me that, yes, Chad, you fail sometimes. So I was out hunting. Some of you know, it's my first year ever deer hunting. So just let you know, I've shot a gun, I think, about 6 times in my life. All right? Shot a gun about 6 times. I'm up in the deer stand up by Black Creek. Some friends have some land up there. And this deer just comes right out of the pines, just sitting right there, about 50 yards away. I shoot at it. It says, not today, and darts the other way, back into the pine trees. How many of you missed the first deer you ever shot at? Okay? How many of you were 12 when you missed the first deer and not 44? Okay, all right. Well, Tim, I think your sight is off on the gun you gave me. I'm pretty sure it's the gun. I'm sure it's the gun. Sometimes we have a fear of failure. But we got to get back out there, and we got to try again. I'm going this afternoon. I'm getting my deer this afternoon. We got to get back out there. And we can't let fear grip us. Number 2, seek God until he takes away your fears. Seek God until he takes away your fears. Pursue him. Go after him. That's what David did. He went after the Lord. He pursued him. He prayed. He wrote psalms. He spoke to the Lord. He talked to the Lord. He laid that burden before the Lord. He said, I'm not going to be gripped by this fear. I'm going to lay it at your feet. I'm going to take this fear off my shoulders, and I'm going to give it to you, Lord, because it's way too heavy for me. How do we do that? We spend time in prayer. It might be through journaling. It might be out in the woods while you're hunting. It might be as you are getting ready for the day in the morning. It might be turning the radio off on your drive to work and talking to the Lord about your fear, communicating to the Lord. Lord, I can't handle this anymore. I can't handle this fear. I need you to take it from me. We give it to the Lord. Look at what David wrote in Psalm 34. I sought the Lord, and what did he do? He answered me. He delivered me from all my fears. God will deliver you from your fears as you pursue him, as you lay it at his feet. The Bible says, do not fear 365 times. Do you think God cares about us? Do you think God wants us to trust him and not let our fears pull us down? David said, he delivered me from all my fears. Will you say that with me? He delivered me from all my fears. Say it again. He delivered me from all my fears. One more time. He delivered me from all my fears. And when you're afraid, this is what you do. You go, I'm with my daddy, I'm with my daddy, I'm with my daddy. You're with your Heavenly Father. You're with your God who's in control and will never leave you, never forsake you. He loves you. And he wants to deliver you from your fears. Let's pray.